Hi, I'm Evan George from Brief. And just last week, I was asked a question by a member of a group on a training program that I've very, very rarely been asked before. I have been asked many times, what are the disadvantages of using the solution-focused approach? I've been asked many times, what are the limitations in using the solution-focused approach? I've been asked many times, what are the potential difficulties with using the solution-focused approach? But I can't remember the last time, until 2 weeks ago, that I was asked the question, what are the main advantages of solution-focused brief therapy? And what added value does it offer over many other forms of therapy? And that set me thinking, and it set me pulling together some of the thoughts, I guess, that I've been having for a while now. The first thing I need to say is that even though I happen to be very, very enthusiastic about the solution-focused approach, coming across it over 35 years ago and having used it as my model of intervention over the whole period of that time, I really do love this approach. However, I hope I'm also realistic. And so I know that there are many other approaches that work well. That's what the research shows us. And if I'm going to rely on research in order to argue the case for solution focus, then I need to acknowledge that research also shows that other approaches work well. And so the question then is, how do people choose an approach to use? And I think that if we want to do our very, very, very best work, then what we need to find is a model, an approach that inspires us. Actually, although it doesn't sound terribly professional, a model that we love. And since all practitioners are different, practitioners vary substantially. And since work settings vary and the people that we work with vary, it seems terribly unlikely to me that actually there's ever going to be one best approach. But what are the factors that for me seem to be significant advantages that solution focus offers, perhaps even over other forms of therapy? And the first I think that we have to start with is brevity. Solution focus really does have the potential to be brief. Solution focus does, in comparison studies, show itself to be either as brief as, or indeed briefer than other approaches. Of course, that's only an advantage if you value brevity. And indeed, some people who take the view that therapy is life-enhancing, that it's good for us, the more the better. But solution-focused practitioners tend not to take that view. So the view that we take as solution-focused practitioners is that, by and large, people have better things to do than to spend their lives talking to people like us, talking with therapists. So the more time that people spend out there getting on with their lives, and the less time that people spend here with me talking about getting on with their lives, the better. So brevity seems to be one of the advantages of this approach. Now, in addition to that, I think we could point to flexibility. Solution focus, after all, we find it being used in therapy, psychotherapy, therapy. We find it being used in counseling. We find it being used in coaching, in supervision, in consultation, in mediation, in conflict management, in team coaching, and in team building. So in a whole range of activities, we find practitioners putting solution focus to work. And in addition to that, after all, we find people using solution focus with individuals, with couples, with families, with groups, obviously with teams and with whole organizations. And solution focus can be used in formal sat-down appointments lasting perhaps 50 minutes or an hour, but equally, we find people using solution focus in conversations in passing, corridor conversations, you could call them. We find people using solution focus face-to-face, online, on the phone, in chat rooms. And so solution focus truly is flexible. Now, perhaps the third advantage, perhaps, or key factor, unique selling point, if you want to call it that, is probably the capacity of the model to build engagement. At Brief, Chris Harvey and I, over the years, have spent a great deal of time working with people who, if truth were told, were probably not terribly keen to work with us. Mandated clients, they're sometimes referred to, reluctant attenders. And what we see in solution focus is truly a capacity to build engagement, even when people arrive somewhat reluctantly, with someone else, perhaps, rather twisting their arm behind their back, saying to them, unless you make changes, difficult things will happen in their lives. Now, of course, if, as solution focus does, we start our intervention being interested in what people's own best hopes are, how will you know that this has been of use to you? Focusing the client's attention on that question, what are your best hopes? What are your best hopes? What can you get out of this that will ensure that it's been of use to you? Then already, right from the beginning of the work, we're taking a step that's likely to move in the direction of that capacity to build engagement. And solution focus does exactly that. So what else? What else can we say about solution focus that potentially makes it useful? Well, I would see solution focus as a non-disruptive model, in the sense that, look, by the end of a session, I would be expecting the service user or the couple or the family to be feeling better than when they came in. Some models, are associated with expectable distress, therapeutic distress as the cost for change, the idea that no gain without pain, pain is inevitable, distress is expectable. But solution focus doesn't assume that. We assume that people will come to a solution focused practitioner, perhaps with very, very, very tough experiences to deal with, trauma, abuse, violence, and that they will leave each and every session feeling better. So solution focus will not disrupt people's lives. We really will not have to assess whether the service user is in a good enough place to deal with the rigors of therapy, because there are no rigors of therapy. Therapy is indeed even likely to be enjoyable. So, brevity, flexibility, engagement, non-disruptive. And I think probably the next thing that stands out for me is the extent to which solution focus is relationally undemanding. Look, if someone goes for therapy and the therapist is using a model that requires the disclosure of a painful history, perhaps even a shameful past, then of course it would be very, very wise on the service user's part to ensure that they trusted that person, in whom, as it were, they are going to give or trust these secrets in that sense. Of course, trust will be necessary. But solution focus doesn't require service users to reveal difficult material. We ask people, what are your best hopes from our talking together? We invite them to describe how they will know that that preferred future is happening in detail. We invite them to think about those elements of that future that they want that are already in place, and we ask them how they're doing it. And we invite them to describe what the next tiny signs of change might be. How well do you have to know someone? How much do you need to trust someone to have such a conversation? And so in solution focus, we don't need to build trust. We truly can just get going. So when the client arrives, we can start work rather than having to spend time building a relationship. So look, what else? We're talking about brevity, flexibility, engagement, non-disruptive, relationally undemanding. And I suppose the next thing for me is the way that solution focus develops. Difficult to put into words, this, but bespoke solutions or bespoke futures. Look, when someone comes to see me in solution focus, I'm not required to have any ideas about how they should move their lives forward. I'm not required in that sense to know what's going on. I'm not required in that way to understand what they need to do in order to make progress. All I do is ask questions. And on the basis of those questions, the service user themselves identifies, finds, describes their own best way forward. And so they find a best way forward, inevitably, that fits them, that fits their identity, their beliefs, the person that they are. And in that sense, in solution focus, we can work across differences of identity without the risk that somehow my ideas are being imposed on the service user in terms of how they should live their life, on the client in terms of how they should live their life. The client is indeed finding, describing a bespoke future, a future that is just right for them. Since all I do as a practitioner is ask questions. There is no content in my languaging, just questions, which support the service user in defining their own best way forward. Look, all of this, you can see, means that solution focus, I think, is good for clients, good for service users. But I suppose the last advantage that occurs to me, I think it's right that it should come last, is that solution focus is also good for workers. The research of Tony Medina and Mark Bayerbach in Spain points us to the fact that solution focus appears to protect workers against burnout. Actually talking with people about their best hopes, supporting them in picturing the lives they want, unpacking their successes, what they're doing that fits with that. The work is inspiring. We're not feeling responsible. The work isn't weighty. That's a better way to put it. The work isn't weighty. Okay. Look, we're not responsible for people making changes. All we do is ask questions that facilitate them in making the changes that they wish to make. Of course, we work hard, and I do work hard in sessions, But the work does not leave me feeling responsible for other people's futures. The client is responsible for their own future. So there we are. A number of potential advantages, and there are more, but those are some of the ones that are standing out for me at the moment. Brevity, flexibility, engagement, non-disruptive, relationally undemanding, bespoke futures, bespoke ways forward, and an approach that's good for clients. No wonder that people across the world are beginning to be more and more interested in this way of working.